Welcome back to Real Steel Cars. Today we're going to talk about the 2021 Porsche 911 Turbo S. There is a lot of changes that came to this car, and I'm going to tell you exactly what they are and why they made these changes, because Chief Engineer at Porsche has some pretty good reasons, and personally I like them. There's also a little bit of mini news at the end of this video about a brand new truck that Ford is working on, and no, it's not an F-150 or a Ranger or has anything to do with the Bronco. Totally new, so make sure you stick around to the end of the video for that. But right now, let's get started on this 2021 Porsche 911 Turbo S. Now, as far as design is concerned, Porsche never really veers too far from the traditional 911 styling. It's a classic design that never goes out of style, so I'm very glad they're not going to go through some drastic changes with it. They just did a little nip and tuck around the corners here, smoothed a couple of edges out there. Overall, looks really good. Now, what the big changes are for this year is the engine and the power increase. The Turbo S is running a 3.8 liter flat six, but this one is putting out 640 horsepower, 590 pound-feet of torque. Now, as usual, that's going through an all-wheel drive system with their PDK automatic transmission. It's an 8-speed auto. No manual is offered in this car. Sorry guys, if you're hoping for one, unfortunately you're not going to be able to get it. Now what that comes out to is a 0 to 60 time of 2.5 seconds, 0 to 124 in 8.9 seconds, and a quarter mile in 10.5. Top speed comes in at 205 miles an hour. Now the intercoolers for this engine are actually mounted above the engine, and for the first time ever, you can opt to get a sport exhaust system straight from Porsche. Now, as far as some of the suspension is concerned, standard equipment comes with rear wheel steering and Porsche's active suspension management system. Now that actually lowers the car about 1/2 of an inch. You're also going to get carbon ceramic disc brakes, 16.5-inch rotors up front with 10 piston calipers, and 15.4-inch rotors in the back. It has a staggered wheel setup with 20-inch wheels up front, 255, 35, 20 tires, and 21s in the back with a 315, 30, 21 tire. Now, just by looking at the car, you can tell the shape of the car is different. And if you're not quite sure why, it's because the front of the car is actually wider. The 911s typically had a classic design of where the front was slightly more narrow than the rear. That is not the case in this one, because they've actually increased the track width of this car by 1.65 inches in the front and 0.4 inches in the rear. It gives it a little bit more of a square stance than their typical 911s of old. They've also increased the width of the spoiler in the back, which increases the downforce. Dr. Frank Stefan Wallister is the chief engineer at Porsche behind this 911 build. What he had to say about the changes made to the car were pretty fascinating. He said that he wanted to give the 911 Turbo a power increase that the driver can actually feel. He said a mere 20 or 30 horsepower isn't really that noticeable. So instead of just turning the boost up a little bit on an existing engine, he actually put larger turbos on this new engine and decreased the compression ratio from 9.8 to 1 to 8.7 to 1 to compensate them. He went on record saying, and I quote, "Maybe you can measure it, but the reason for a new turbo is that you can feel something, that you feel a difference. We want it to really make a step. You can really feel the size of the engine, and once the turbos reach boost pressure, it's really impressive. The car is a little bit more raw." Now, I like the way he used the word raw, to actually feel that power, to feel that extra torque. Now, it has 60 more horsepower than the outgoing 911 Turbo S, but it's the 37 pound-feet of torque that he's saying is what you're going to feel, what's going to make the difference in the driving experience. Now, that raw power and that raw feeling, that surge, is that experience that he's talking about, and that is what makes a fun car. Going 0 to 60 or 0 to 100, it's just a number. It's the feel and the sensation you get when you do that is what makes a car fun. I would rather drive a car that's slower, that gave me that fun, raw sensation, than one that was faster, that just kind of gradually got up to that speed and didn't have all that. So I'm really excited about the direction Porsche went with the new 911 and really keeping with that driver enthusiast feel. Porsche has always been one of the manufacturers that have always put that first and foremost above anything else. They're a driver's car, they're an enthusiast car. Even the more affordable Porsche Cayman with 400 horsepower, it's a much smaller, more affordable, obtainable car, still has that driver feel. It has that enthusiasm, and that's what I really like about Porsche, more so than a lot of the other supercar manufacturers. So I applaud them on that. Great job. I'm very curious to see what other journalists have to say about it when they actually get on the track, on the street, see how it feels and see how it drives. I have a feeling in my gut it's not going to be a disappointment. All right, so we're going to move on to that bit of mini news that I mentioned earlier in the video. Ford is working on a new truck. Now, we know that just last year they reintroduced the Ford Ranger. Now they're working on the Ford Bronco, and they're also working on an all-electric F-150. Now we have the Ranger in that mid-size segment, but Ford wants to go one smaller. Back in the day, if you remember, we had vehicles like the little S10 Blazer, and the Ranger back then was even significantly smaller than what it is now. So Ford wants to go back and add another truck to that smaller segment. So they're working on one right now under the code name P758. Now this is a truck that they're saying they want to have a starting price of under $20,000 and $5,000 less than the base version of the Ranger, which is a midsize truck. Now this is not going to be a body on frame truck as the Ranger. This is actually going to be a unibody that is based on the global Ford Focus platform. Now since it is sitting on the Focus platform, that should give you an idea how small this truck's going to be. Ford claims that now with the full-size trucks like the F-150 getting larger and larger, the mid-size trucks are also getting larger, they still feel that there's a need for a smaller variation. So that's what they're working on. We're going to have to wait and see what the details are, what kind of engines they're going to put in it, what kind of capabilities they're going to have, but I'm not going to expect a whole lot out of these things. If you remember the Ranger from the back in the 90s, that's probably what I suspect they're going to go for. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we'll just have to wait and see. Again, drop your comments down below. Let me know what you think of that. Make sure you drop your likes and comments on what you think of the Porsche 911 Turbo S. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you next time.